In the basement of his apartment in New York, John smashes the ground with a sledgehammer repeatedly as Viggo describes him as a man of focus, commitment, and sheer will. The sound of the hammer is perfectly synced with the words as John digs up the past. John Wick was a former professional and elite hitman. In his previous career as a violent killer for hire, John's legendary exploits have earned him the nickname Baba Yaga, which means the boogeyman. He retired a living legend from the assassin's world to pursue a normal life with his beloved wife Helen, who died after suffering for a long time, and now John mourns her painful death. On the other side of New York, Viggo Tasarov, a notorious crime boss, who has employed John in the past, is on the top of his world. His only concern was his only son, Yosef Tasarov, a spoiled young man who thinks he is entitled to everything because of his father. After the funeral, John receives a mysterious package containing a letter from Helen and her gift, a beagle puppy. In her letters, Helen tells John that he needs a companion to help him find peace, and her gift was a place to start. A few days later, John leaves his home with a dog. He arrives at a gas station with his black Mustang that his wife gave him and begins to fill it. Not long after, Yosef and his friends arrived blasting music. While John is minding his business, Yosef starts a conversation with John admiring his car, and asks John to sell the car for him. John politely tells him the car is not for sale. Yosef tries to intimidate him with his Russian, but John responds in kind and drives off. John goes to an airfield and begins to drive the car ridiculously fast. It was as if he was releasing the anger pent up inside him. He almost crashes it into one of 3 trucks in front of him, but he brakes just in time. Later that night, John spends time with his dog and cuddles it. As John is about to sleep, the dog barks and goes downstairs, which causes John to follow him. When John arrives, he sees 2 men standing in the living room. Then, within a split second, another man hits John from the back and he goes down. The lights got turned on and the masked men began beating John, who was lying defenselessly on the ground. They ask where the keys to the car are while tearing down the house. Seeing John being beaten up, the dog gets scared and begins to whine, which angers Yosef. He chases the dog and brutally kills the puppy while John watches the bleeding on the floor. One of the men eventually finds the car keys and they leave after knocking out John. Sometime later, John wakes up with his dead dog in front of him. John mourns the dog, the last gift of his wife, and buries it in his backyard early. John spends the rest of the morning cleaning the floor and playing the recent events in his head again and again. Yosef arrives with the Mustang at a garage owned by Aurelio, a mechanic who runs an illegal chop shop for stolen cars. Yosef, who is planning to keep the car, asks him to arrange new clean papers and a new vehicle identification number. But Aurelio immediately identifies the car and asks Yosef where he got it. Feeling entitled, Yosef didn't want to answer the question. So Aurelio, who knows John personally, tells him to get the car out of the shop. But Yosef began his intimidation, to which Aurelio didn't respond well. After some altercation, Yosef and his goons leave the garage with the car. After a while, John took the bus and arrived at Aurelio's garage. Aurelio told him everything that happened after offering him something to drink. John borrows a car from Aurelio and leaves. Meanwhile, Viggo Tasarov, who just closed a good business deal, hears about the foolish actions of his son from Aurelio after hearing about Yosef being struck. He waits for his son filled with anger. Viggo pretentiously welcomes his son and begins beating him up. Yosef didn't know why his father got violent, so Viggo explained about the man he stole the car from. He tells Yosef that John, the legendary assassin who Yosef thought was nobody, was one of the ones who laid the foundation for the organization Yosef boasts about. When John asked to leave after meeting Helen, Viggo gave him an impossible task that John pulled off successfully. The impossible task was the groundwork the Tasarov mob stood for today. Yosef thought he could fix it, but Viggo told his naive son to get out of his sight after hugging him. Viggo calls John and tries to talk him out of the action he is about to take revenge on, but John hangs up the phone while he is speaking. Viggo understood the meaning. John was coming for everyone. He tells Victor, his right-hand man, to send every man they have to the house. Back at his home and filled with vengeance, John goes downstairs and digs out a box, which contains weapons and gold coins, a currency of the assassin world. He puts on his suit like he used to when on the job and arms himself. Viggo's men arrive at the scene and the shootout begins. John takes out everybody one by one using his gun, which has a silencer on top of it. He combines his excellent hand-to-hand combat skills with his precise shooting ability and executes them without wasting a single bullet. After the shootout is over, Jimmy, a policeman who knows about John's job, comes over to John's house to address a noise complaint. He asks John if he is working, but John tells him that he is sorting something out. Then, Jimmy leaves without saying much. John calls a cleanup crew headed by Charlie, who is surprised to hear from John. The crew removes every bloodstain and leaves the bodies in a van after John pays Charlie with the gold coins. Knowing all his men have died, Viggo puts a $2 million contract out on John's head. Then, he tells Victor to put his son at a club called the Red Circle, to use him as bait. Viggo also visits Marcus, a hitman, and John's closest friend. He informs him about the open contract and tells him to take care of the matter soon. Marcus agrees to the proposal. After Viggo leaves, Marcus is seen preparing his sniper while John goes to the Continental, an international chain of luxury hotels that serve as a neutral ground for the members of the criminal underworld, in New York. John makes a longer reservation, expressing his desire to stay until business is concluded. Then, he goes to a secret underground room, where he meets Winston Scott, the owner and manager of the New York Continental Hotel, who ruthlessly enforces the hotel's law. John asks Winston where he could find Yosef. Before giving John an answer, Winston warns him about the dangers of dipping his toes back into this world. Meanwhile, Viggo receives news about John staying on the Continental. Then, he doubles the bounty for those willing to break the cardinal rule of the Continental: no business can be conducted on Continental grounds, and doing so will result in a heavy penalty. After getting the address, John goes back to his room and prepares for an attack on the Red Circle Club. He arms himself with a knife and machine guns and goes to the club, where many of Viggo's men are keeping a watchful eye while Yosef is seen relaxing in the pool. John arrives at the club and tortures Victor for information on the whereabouts of Yosef and drowns him in the handwash. Then, he goes through the club killing everyone who stood in his way. But, before he could get to him, Yosef flees and escapes John's wrath, dressed with only a towel. Injured, John returns to the Continental and asks for a doctor, who comes up to his room and stitches him up. While John is resting, Marcus, who is in the other building with a sniper, alerts him of the intruder, Mrs. Perkins, a female hitman who is willing to violate the rules of the Continental to kill John and take the double bounty. After some struggle, John subdues Perkins and she gives up the location of Viggo's money stash. John gives Perkins to Harry, another hitman next door, who accepts John's offer to babysit her for a price, and then goes to a church near Cannon Court, which is a front for the money stash. He kills everyone and burns everything in the vault underground. But, he doesn't leave the place. Instead, he stays and waits for Viggo's men to appear. Meanwhile, at the Continental, Perkins frees herself from the handcuffs, breaking her thumb, and kills Harry, who was distracted talking about the broken rules. John tracks Viggo's men, who went to report to their boss about the incident at the church. While Viggo is furiously scolding everyone, John shows up and begins to shoot everyone. But, this time, John gets knocked out by Viggo's head of security, who hits him with a car. He gets tied up and Viggo expresses his anger to him about the loss of documents, which Viggo planned to use as leverage. Then, he tells John that the death of his wife was a punishment from God. This infuriates John and gives him an ultimatum to give up his son. Viggo orders John's death before he leaves, and when two of his men are about to suffocate him, Harry shoots one of them with his sniper and John kills the other. John intercepts Viggo's car and causes it to crash. Then, he asks Viggo to give up the location of Yosef holding him at gunpoint. John lets Viggo walk away after Viggo tells him where his son is staying and agrees to pull the contract. He arrives in Brooklyn at a fortified safe house. Although the men are prepared, John kills most of them with a sniper and blows up the escape car. Finally, he shoots Yosef in the head and kills him. Later, John prepares to leave after meeting Marcus and thanking him, but Perkins sees them together and tells Viggo, who captures Marcus at his home and tortures him. Marcus managed to escape his restraints, but he was gunned down by Perkins. John, who received a call from Viggo about Marcus, turns his car around and arrives at Marcus's house, only to find him dead on the ground. At the same time, Perkins is met by Winston, who informs her that her membership of the Continental has been revoked. Then, Winston's men execute her while she is standing. Winston also informs John of the location of the helicopter Viggo is about to take off in, and John arrives at the scene. After some car chase and shootout, John and Viggo face off against each other and a bloody combat ensues. In the end, John stabs Viggo and leaves him to die. Then, he breaks into an animal clinic, where he takes one of the dogs and leaves after treating his wounds.